documentary that explained and describes some properties of the sound vibration, how sound is very powerful and how sound affects us. Of course, this we will also discuss today, but those examples that were given last Sunday are different examples. I'll just repeat them, just few of them. There was a discussion on water, how the water can have different properties. Essentially it's the same, chemically it's the same, but the molecules of the water, the structure of the water, it's not the same. That differs according to the vibration that the water is exposed. And it's not only water, it's also all the other elements that are affected by the sound vibration. So sound is extremely powerful. What examples have been given is that certain of those elements can be not just affected by direct sound that we perceive, but they can be affected by the thoughts also. So there was one boat which has caught on fire. It was traveling from Liverpool to San Francisco, and after some days of voyage it caught on fire, and of course it had to be abandoned. And then the captain and the crew, they just ended up in some little saving boats a little bit. And there was nothing else, and their supply of drinking water got short, and they were facing a great dilemma now what to do, because without drinking water, how long you can live? 3-4 days, that's it. So then they were so desperate that they started dreaming of the fresh water. They started dreaming about fresh springs and fresh water. And the captain was such a experienced and very serene man, and he decided that just gathered the courage and scooped the ocean water. If you drink water, ocean water, if you drink salty water, you'll go mad. So somehow or other he did that, and when he tasted it, it was sweet. It's incredible how the certain meditation, how the certain thoughts can affect the elements around you. That's an amazing feature. That's amazing power. There's another example of a group of scientists working on the biological weapons. And the session just broke suddenly, and then what happened is they discovered that every one of them had the symptoms of food poisoning. What did they eat? Nothing. Was there anything else that was found to affect them? Nothing. They were just drinking water from the table. So it was found out at that time they couldn't, the result and the effect, the consequence that was ascribed to that kind of, those kind of symptoms was just food poisoning. So they couldn't understand at that time. That was in Southeast Asia, so now 40 years ago. So then what was understood that actually those kind of malice and envy and anger and very, very negative thoughts were portrayed and being present and affected that water. And that water remained H2O, but the structure changed and assumed different properties which affected people who took that water. So many different kinds of examples have been provided like this to point out that our thoughts, our actions, vibrations of any kind affect our being, affect our mind as well. So subtle and gross. Gross body, subtle body. So anyway, that was last time for some of you who have not been present. So today what we're going to do, we're going to continue this discussion on sound. What are the properties of sound? What is sound? It's going to take a while. A lot of points are there. So let's switch off the lights and then let's start immediately. Yeah. Okay. So the power of sound. We all know when we are exposed to lightning, how it feels. And if you've ever been outside, maybe not so much in the cities, but if you're outside in the nature, and you hear the thundering sound, how it feels. How it feels. Scared to death, I just really start trembling sometimes. I know when I was a kid, I used to go to farmhouse or something in mountains and stuff. When it starts thundering, it really, scares everything out of you. So it's very powerful. That's a power of sound. One type of power of sound. Okay, there's a boy with some sweets. Woohoo, As a known story, it's attributed to Gandhi, but anyway. That one mother, she brought her child to him, taking him for a long distance to reach out to him, and requesting him to instruct her son not to eat sweets, which of course, for children to give them such kind of a restriction, that sounds like this. It's almost impossible. So then, what happened, he said that please come after 1 or 2 weeks again. And then what could she do? She took such an enormous, such a long journey and took so much trouble, and somehow or other that son had a lot of faith in him, in such kind of a leader. So then she had no other option but then go back, and she came back after 1-2 weeks. And then she requested him again, please request my son, instruct my son, tell him not to eat sweets because it's bad for his health. So the one teeth is missing, and it's like, it's not just that. Yeah. So then he said, please don't eat sweets. And then she was she was taken aback, just puzzled. But you could have done that, 1-2 weeks ago. Why you didn't do so? And then when he replied, it's very interesting, he said, at that time I was still eating sweets myself. So we have to understand the potency of the sound. We're going to talk about modulation. Modulation means expressing sound by different tones, in different ways, different pitches. It's not all the same. Not all the sound, not all the sounds, not all the words. It's not all the same. It makes big difference, even on such level. What to speak when something is spoken. Let's say something is spoken with conviction, with realization, with deeper understanding. The effect is way more greater. It's not all the same. It can't be all the same. We know anybody can just read something. And many times you may hear something and it won't impel you to act, right? It just won't mean anything to you. It just won't penetrate you. It just won't even reach to your heart. It won't inspire you, so you won't act. But when somebody else makes the same statement, it will have a different effect. It makes a big difference. So what is it? So that's why we see that when one who instructs practices the same, and that's very important in spiritual life. That's called achar and prachar. It's not all the same. And one may be talking the same things, but if one is not practicing, one is not utilizing that knowledge, one is not exemplifying that knowledge, then it won't have the same effect, neither on him, neither on anybody else. Yeah. So that's a very important example. So here we have an interesting quote. He said, Tesla said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So we know practically everything is vibration, and the modern science points to that. Everything is vibration. Some kind of frequency, some kind of vibration. I'm talking about string theory or whatever else. Everything is vibration. So we know that when we go down to the atoms, we know that everything vibrates, everything has its own certain frequency, everything has some kind of motion is there, nothing is static, everything is in constant flux. So all the way down to any kind of particle, there's constant change going on, there's constant movement that is happening. So we see that also in terms of different kinds of combination of atoms, right? These are molecules. They also have different kinds of properties as such that point out that there is a lot of different kinds of motion and vibration that is going on. So then when we look at our body, then we also see that our body has certain frequencies as well. Body is also vibrating. They've measured different and they found out that our body has also different organs have different frequencies. Our body also has certain kind of frequency that vibrates. And of course, why is that used for? It's used in terms of health, because when your organs or your body doesn't vibrate in a certain way that it should, and of course then you're considered to be sick. Right? And then they try to adjust this by applying the different techniques, the different even machines invented that affect your different either parts of the body, organs of the body, or your whole body, trying to restore its health. So that is also there. And of course there is a neural activity, our human brain waves. I see the different kinds of gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. We can see they all have different qualities. Like gamma, it's like peak focus, insight, expanded consciousness, then beta, alertness, concentration, cognition. Alpha is very important. We'll mention alpha several times. That's a state of relaxation, visualization, creativity. It's very important for spiritual life. Then theta, it's meditation, intuition, memory, detached awareness, healing, and sleep. That's delta. So brain is also, there's so much vibration going on. There's so many different kinds of frequencies as such. So then we know that thoughts and feelings are also waves. They're also vibrations. It's more subtle, but it's the same, it's the frequency. It also affects us and it can be affected. And that's also used for the mostly healthy purposes. So just a few months back, what has been, of course it has been already known, there are certain kind of brain implants that has been used for healing when some people have had some certain sickness. But what has been proposed just recently, there was a World Economic Forum that's in Switzerland, that actually something could be implanted within human beings and affect them pretty much almost to the point that can lead to that point without their will. So thoughts and feelings can be infused within someone. So that's not something that it's very, I know of course there is, I kept all this different information here, you can read it yourself. It's very dangerous actually. It's very dangerous. Of course they state a wonderful future, you can fight the crime. Of course you can have absolute surveillance of someone being kind of more productive. Of course you can draw, if you surveil someone, you won't allow anybody any kind of lapse or any kind of freedom. Of course you can practically treat someone as a absolute robot, finding love or something. Yeah, well, all kinds of things can be there, but then where is our free will? What happens to our free will? And then anyone can utilize you practically in any way they want. So it's a very, very dangerous technology that is developed. It exists. That means if you are having that brain chips, let's say, feeling that if I have access to it, or I can somehow gain control over you in such a way that I influence so many different thoughts and feelings into you, then I can do with you whatever I want. It's extremely dangerous, extremely. So of course there's a lot of that kind of a discussion going on whether this is really human or not, and without anyone's concession, and how will this go on, but there's a lot of pressure for it. There's a lot of pressure for it, that everybody wears some kind of a chip through which one will be controlled in some way or another. So anyway, very dangerous thing, which of course exists. So then what we see, it's very interesting that the planet also, we talk about body, we talked about atoms, but the planet, our planet also has a natural vibration. It's 7.83 hertz. What is interesting is that it is exactly like the frequency of our brain and the heart, which is at the alpha state. So we see that there is some synchronicity between our planet and our body. If you disturb that, of course, then there's a sickness. And if you disturb the planet, which is going on, of course, if you disturb the body, then there's going to be a lot of negative effect. So it's very interesting that Earth's magnetic resonance, and this is no wonder that why the scriptures say that on the planet there are some places that are more natural and more positive and more prone to healing and restoration of one's consciousness and health than the other. And those places are called dhams, or holy places. Yeah. So that's very, so we see that the planet is not just some kind of dull material object. It has frequency. Whatever actually has a frequency, whatever has some kind of energy, that means there's some personality behind. There's some being. It's not just energy in itself. Okay, so these are some of the nice places. Anyway, then we see also the notes. They correspond to different frequencies, which also affect our thoughts, also affect our health. There's some hashing technique have been used in South Indian system, and they're all. What is interesting, they're all very synchronized with mathematical principles. Nothing is just something like abstract or by chance. No, it's all very much in synchrony. So then we have different energetic points which are there in the body, of course, which affect us emotionally and in various other ways. That also has its own frequency. That also corresponds to certain vibrations, to certain frequencies. And we know in music, different notes when they're played, they affect different parts of the body, and they affect different kind of unhealthy states. Anyway, there are a lot of details here. Which one affects what and in which way, and then their combination. It's a very complex science, actually. Science means it's something that this is what we're going to be talking, something that you can measure, something that is very clear. Then, of course, this effect of music, they've done a lot of experiments, and you may say, plants don't have ears. How do plants hear? How can they be exposed to anything as such? Well, they don't have ears, but they feel vibrations. And also something I'm going to point out now, which we're going to be stressing later on as well, is that it's not just that there's a gross body or just gross being or our gross existence that is there, but it's also subtle. It's also subtle. It's not just everything so gross. We perceive everything gross, but there is also our subtle existence that is there. So plants also have their subtle existence. But in essence, anyway, they react to vibrations. That's very clear. They react to vibrations. They react to. I mean, plants don't have eyes, right? Then why the sunflower, follows the sun and so forth and so on. Right? But they feel. They feel the energy. They feel the heat. They feel the vibrations. So they did these different experiments, and they played different types of music. So that when they played classical music, it pointed, and it was obvious that the plants were more encouraged to grow and expand and flourish, whereas they played very loud and noisy and distorted different types of sounds, then the plants would tend to fade and even die practically. So then, of course, they did also experiments on animals. Yeah, they did experiments on different rats and mice. And what happened when some of them had some, of course, unfortunately, they did these experiments on the animals. It's not a very nice thing to do, but what to do, they did it already. But the effects were that after certain operations, those who were exposed to certain mild and, as I said, classical music, they tend to recover much faster. Their healing process was way faster. And when they were exposed to different kinds of very loud and noisy disturbing music, then that recovery was very slow. That's very interesting. And then also it affected, different type of music affected their intelligence. When they were put to the maze or something, or they were supposed to resolve some things and get some food and this and that, when they were exposed to very soothing music, they're much faster and quicker. And then where it was the opposite type of music or something that was not so nice or noisy or destructive, they're just lost. And even what has been found, that they tend to turn to become like cannibals. They were eating each other or fighting very much, or so many negative things happen. So then we see that this classical music, we're going to talk about the modes, different modes. Let's say music in a sattva guna, music in a mode of goodness, something that is very relaxing, peaceful. It reduces cortisol. It is of course essential to some extent, but it's basically very bad chemical in our body. And then the loud and fast music produces that stress. Sometimes you need some passion. Sometimes it's okay. You need some passion. You want to go out. You want to do this and that, whatever. You need something to boost your confidence or whatever it is. But on the long term, it's very, very destructive. It's very unhealthy in the long term. So then, of course, they use the sound as a weapon. This is sonic and ultrasonic weapons. They can make somebody paralyzed, they can make him vomit or becoming sick or panic, or so many different kinds of effects can be produced by the sound. And then they have also LRAD, which can damage your hearing process, and also it can affect you in so many different ways. Like in the beginning we showed that thunder, when you become scared or something, it has enormous effect. So they use it as a weapon. So here we have these modes. Goodness means it's just something that's very natural, very soothing, very rejuvenating. When you're exposed. Then the rajas is like a life in the city. A lot of passion, a lot of movement, a lot of desires, a lot of hankering, a lot of things happening and such. And then mode of ignorance, it's mode of ignorance. It's just very sickening. It's very bad. Intoxication and stuff like this. Very improper, imbalanced life. So we can see here. So we can see these effects of the sound vibration and effects of different types of music. It can also be divided into these three basic categories, like sattva, rajas, and tamas. You can see the different music having different kind of effect, So if you can read for yourselves, I don't have to read through all of this, but at least through this chart you can get some idea how that means, like different outlook, how it is affected through these different qualities of the nature, and that corresponds to these different types of music. You can classify different types of music in these categories and see what kind of effect you're going to get. So you can read for yourself just for a moment. This is what kind of effect you're going to get. And this is very important because, like we said, our thoughts, our mind, our health, everything can be influenced by different vibrations. It can be influenced artificially by someone also. And that's already done. They did so many experiments with different electrodes pinching your brain, making you feel happy, making you feel angry, making you feel like this. They do all that stuff. That's all that's going on. So in a similar way, actually what is happening when we're exposed to different qualities of the nature, we also become influenced. But that's something that you can also affect by exposing yourself. You can know, what do I want to expose myself? What kind of result I want to get? So that's something that we as humans have a fortune or ability to take advantage of. If we organize our life as a lifestyle in this particular type of mode, and then we'll get different types of results. Krishna explained this in Bhagavad Gita, 14 chapter, 17 and somewhat 18 chapter, how these different qualities of the modes affect us, and how by using those different modes we can of course become bound, we can become animalistic, but we can also reach liberation. It depends what we do, it's a whole science. Okay. So sound and karma, how does our action corresponds to different vibrations. So here are some examples of the speech, of the words. In Jyotish Shastra, it is explained that the sound vibration, the way we influence others, we speak to others, whatever, that it's carried on for lifetimes. All the other karma can be burned within one lifetime. Different type of other karmas, like thoughts or actions even, acting upon it. But speech is very, very powerful and very, very, one has to be extremely responsible how one influences others by giving them instructions or saying something to someone. This is karma that it's very powerful karma that goes on for lifetimes. It doesn't get exhausted, doesn't get burned so easily, and it becomes fulfilled like that in the course of a longer period of time. So here is something that said, the ignorant seek to injure the wise by malice and backbiting. By doing so, the critic takes upon himself the load of the wise man's sins. You see, if you criticize someone or something, you take someone's bad qualities on yourself. Have to be careful about that. Which he, the wise man, casts off by forgiving the ignorant. Okay, a person being criticized should not criticize in retaliation, for the pain felt upon receiving criticism, if endured, will itself consume the critics and bring in exchange the result of his good deeds. One who remains tolerant, not becoming angry, certainly attains the abuser's pious credit. That's interesting. Yeah. When you get in certain kind of conflict with someone, you take their bad, they take your bad, you take their positive and good credits. Indeed, his own sins are transferred to that wrathful person. A person who praises someone in his presence but criticizes him behind his back is no better than a dog. His chances for elevation to higher planes are completely spoiled in this world. Okay, one more. Whoever indulges in praising or criticizing the qualities and behavior of others will quickly become deviated from his own best interest by his entanglement in illusory dualities. So we have to be careful. That's kind of sound, negative sound vibration, which we know every fight starts how? First by this. Your mother this, your father that, and so on. Sound is very powerful. Anyway, sound. Okay, so like plants, also snakes, they don't have ears, ear holes kind of, but they sense vibration. Yeah. Of course, these kind of players can use different tricks to arouse the snakes in different ways. But snakes do feel vibrations. They feel like croaking of the frogs. I always get a little bit. I lived in certain places where we didn't have electricity, and then we get up early in the morning, and our bathing place, it's a walking distance, and you hear a lot of frogs around. And when you hear a lot of frogs around, you know where there are frogs, and they were the snakes. Found many cobras. So it's a real trip every morning to to go and take a bath. It's a very uneasy feeling. Yeah. Anyway, snakes feel vibration. They feel vibration. So there was one example. Our founder Acharya Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, he said, had one friend in Lucknow. There was one famous building where there were several snake bites. Somewhere the snake entered. It was an old building, and it was hiding somewhere. They couldn't find it. So what they did, they called some Mohammedan snake charmer. And this fellow, after some time, he caught a snake. It was one cobra. So I think some people died also. It was a very serious thing. So he caught that cobra. And different sound vibrations, to have control over those snakes. So snakes could be controlled by the mantra. I had one, I still have, but I didn't see him for a while. There's one friend of mine from Assam. Assam, Bengal, somewhat Kerala, they're famous for tantras. So his grandfather was a tantric, but he was kind of white tantric, not so much a black tantric. And he told me anyway very interesting stories, and he said that his grandfather, one of those was that his grandfather, when he would go and sleep nighttime, he would have one bamboo stick. He would just chant some mantras, keep that stick next to his bed, and peacefully sleep outside in the fresh air. And then what would happen in the morning, he would, of course, before the morning, that night, whichever mosquito was in the vicinity would get stuck to that stick and wouldn't bite him. So in the morning we just take the stick, put it in the jungle, chant another mantra, mosquitoes would fly away. It's the power of the sound. And then of course we know that fires we hear in the Vedas for the yagyas were just pronounced, they were chanted, and the fire would appear. They had that ability to invoke the fire by the mantra. So in the Shilpa Shastra there are certain mantras, certain heavy objects and very hard objects that can be made soft and they can be made light by certain sound vibrations. Mantras are there, but nobody, you see, that's the point. They don't know the science, how to pronounce the mantras. It's not all the same, you know. So then they would carve the stone or whatever, then they would chant the mantras to attain its original density, heaviness, and all the other original properties. And it's amazing, they could make marvelous structures. So in Dwarka, Krishna also used the sound as a weapon. We talked about weapons. It said here, I shot well-robed arrows which looked like poisonous snakes, high-flying and burning arrows from my sharanga bow, at King Shalva. King Shalva had something like a UFO kind of thing. Vimana, it flew and became invisible and went in various other patterns. The Shalva became invisible, O proprietor of Kuru's lineage, concealed by wizardry, and I was astounded. The bands of Danavas with grimacing faces and disheveled hair screeched out loud as I held my ground, great king. I quickly laid on an arrow which killed by seeking out the sound to kill them, and the seeking subsided. So that's a weapon. All the Danavas who had been screeching lay dead, killed by the blazing sun-like arrows that were triggered by sound. You want to say this mythology or something? Well, I think it's amazing, even if you would consider it as such. I want to speak of science because they knew how to use the sound properties in such an amazing manner. We hear over and over, all over the scriptures, Mahabharata especially, Ramayana, whatever it is, you know, how amazing abilities they had, because all of those warriors, all of those kshatriyas, like I said, like that charmer of the snakes and so forth, it's not just a certain mantra, it's ability to chant that mantra. One has to have certain practice. That's why in ancient times the kshatriyas would also go to Gurukul. They would practice austerity, they would practice renunciation, they would practice so many wonderful processes to attain wonderful qualities. And then by that, when they chant mantra, they would have an effect, like I gave you that example of sweets in the beginning. Then the effect would be there. And they had to practice it over and over and chant it over and over. It's like charging. You charge a certain element with certain sound, and then it has a certain potency. You know, like we know, Bhishma would shoot the arrows, he could create a dam. Arjuna could create an umbrella, or they could just take a grass and power it with a mantra, throw the grass, burn the whole chariot. I mean, amazing stuff. You read Mahabharata. How did that happen? It's just some kind of story or something. You know, they had, even Oppenheimer said, yeah, Krishna and Arjuna, they used the, you know, atomic weapon. We know what the Brahmastra is. Has this description of the exactly same effects that has been produced. So sound was very powerful and very powerfully utilized. Okay. So then, what is the very important thing is that sound has a form. It's not just some abstract impersonal something, some just noise, because there's a difference between noise, even science says so, there's a difference between sound and the noise. Noise doesn't have a form. Sound has a form. You know, as if like, if now I start, would that be very interesting to sit here and listen to something like that? That's noise. I can make even worse sounds like this, or better to say worse noise. It doesn't have a form. It doesn't have a form. Or sometimes actually you could measure, even this in one sense has a form, but that form is absolutely distorted. Absolutely distorted and unattractive. It's just complete chaos. If you, like we talked about water last time, if you would have made such sounds and then observe it under microscope, those molecules of water will be absolutely distorted, horrifying. Yeah. So in essence, sounds has a form. So look at the notes here. Look at all this. Look at all these wonderful patterns. Every note has its particular pattern. Cymatic patterns of sound. Cymatics, it's a science developed by one Nobel Prize winner in Switzerland, Hans Jenny. And he developed that it's a vibrating plate, it's measuring instruments, it's a certain machine, you put different even liquids or particles of sand or different fillings, magnetic fillings, this and that, and you put sound vibrations and it will give you a certain form of any sound. What was interesting also that when he would tilt the liquid and the still vibration was going on, it would not respond to the gravitational field. It would remain on that plate. So that's what's very interesting. How powerful the sound as a vibration is. Yeah. So we see in the West. You don't see this in India, of course, unless you go to somewhere up north. Himachal, whatever, Uttarakhand, or maybe you get some snow there, or Kashmir or something, whatever, Nepal is that. And you get, on your windows, I used to look when I was a kid, on your windows, inside is warm, outside is cold, and your windows you have all these different snowflakes, different wonderful shapes, interesting shapes, would appear. So there was one lady, she said that the forms of snowflakes and faces of flowers may take on their shapes because they are responding to some sound in nature. Likewise, it is possible that crystal plants and human beings may be in some way music that has taken on visible form. That's how Jenny presented the same idea. That's why they did. The sound has a form. Sound invokes certain material elements, practically it creates a form. It can be subtle, it can be gross. So it's amazing. So we see that in Vedic scriptures, sound is represented by yantra. You have different yantras. That means different geometrical shapes. And that yantra also represents the universe. The whole universe is represented by different forms, by different shapes, by different whatever manifestations are there. So that's very interesting. Like this is Shri Yantra. There's so many other yantras that are there, represented by different mantras. So mantra, yantra, and then you have a certain three-dimensional form. So we see that the whole universe, see, like this is Fibonacci sequence. We find it in the nature. It's just this golden ratio. Find it in so many different kinds of forms and shapes, and even the whole universe practically. I see the galaxies also, it corresponds to this. Like we say the notes, if you remember, we talked about notes. Notes also corresponds to very symmetrical mathematical principles. So all the sounds correspond to different forms, different shapes, in the whole universe. And then the ragas do have certain forms. The ragas are the musical melodies. There's a personality behind, which have certain complexion, certain dress, certain forms, certain shapes, certain gender even, certain things. Different ragas invoke, they are personalities. Everything is personality. Like we said, there is no energy without energetic. So Hingoli raga, that's Radha and Krishna on the swing. And then Vasanta, that's a Cupid. There's so many different, they have a form. Of course, if you don't play properly, then those forms are distorted. You won't get a proper form manifested. And that's why one has to be very careful. So therefore, sound and the form, when we say Krishna, that's a person. Sound, Krishna, it's no different than Krishna. So somebody may object, how come a certain word, there's no meaning practically behind a word. What does that mean that a sound has a form? Because whatever we ascribed by material sound vibration, it's temporary, it doesn't exist. It doesn't have. But as an answer to such kind of a doubt, for example, when we say an airplane, it's not just the word, it's also, there's so many examples that we are not aware of. There's so many examples, but you have certain different kinds of airplanes you've never seen in life, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist. It's not within your perception, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It's a concept also behind it. That when you say an airplane, you already have the idea what it is. Yeah, you have some idea what it is. You might never seen, I don't know, maybe Garuda Airlines. Maybe nobody flew, but it doesn't mean that Garuda Airline doesn't exist. It's an airplane, or maybe B2, or maybe FDs, or something, whatever, you know, or so this one and that one. May not never seen any of those, but you know, when you say airplane, what it means. It's a concept also. But beyond even examples that you might not have perception of, or you may not have been exposed to, and even the concept may be something that can be in the back of our mind or whatever it is, there's just that understanding that, let's say if I say Vimana, it's a spiritual airplane, that it exists also, that it's described, and it has that kind of form, unique form, that it's produced by that sound. Because it's not that, like for example, when I say human beings, whether they exist now or not, they have been existing in the past, they will exist in the future. So the word has a certain example, it has a certain concept, but has also a certain form behind it. So that's something interesting from the spiritual point of view. So it's not just a mere word. No, it has so much behind it. It has so much potency behind it. It has so much existence behind it. So we can understand so much more, because the challenge might be then how do we ascribe, or how do we use material sounds to describe something that is spiritual? Yeah. So that we're going to be talking a little bit later. We'll point out how there is that spiritual potency, that it's prevailing some certain material mediums. That is what is there. And then through that potency we can understand what is that form behind the sound vibration that is pronounced. Anyway, I know that sounds a little bit complicated now, but we'll try to resolve it a little bit later when we describe different levels of the sound. We'll gain a little bit better idea. Okay. So sound is an information. Words, of course, that's something you need for human beings. We know in relationships, we know in writing how it invokes different emotions, different dealings, and so forth. That's pretty much on the gross level. The ear receives the sounds, mind is analyzing, stores it for future use. We get knowledge, we get information. Very powerful, very powerful. I mean, sound has an incredible effect. So specifically through knowledge, through information like this. So human beings are way more developed, definitely, compared to any other beings. So on this gross level that is the case. But then also we know that on the subtle level, it's not just that we have gross ears. Even if you wouldn't have gross ears or something, you would be able to hear. That's something that's interesting. Because again, it's not just the gross, there is a subtle being. There is a subtle sense that exists. And then of course there's spiritual also. That is also there. So we can perceive different levels of the sound. So idea of the sound, how is it defined in the Srimad Bhagavatam? It says that which conveys the idea of an object. Like I was talking about airplanes. Immediately, what is airplane? You immediately understand what is an airplane. Yeah, and it's not just an example. Like let's say let's say, or identity. Let's say just identity. You're in the car and you get hit. And what do you say? You hit me. What does that mean? Are you hit or the car is hit? The car is hit. But the idea of I've been hit, that exists there. Why? Because of course nobody fashions you as a car, so it's not an example. It's not a concept behind your mind that you are the car. You don't keep that idea about yourself as a car, but you just identify in a sense that you're hit, you're being hit. So that idea of that identity of certain kind of sound vibration, and the example and the concept behind it's just that you can't separate. You can't separate one from the other. It all gives you the complete shape, the complete form. So it can't be without the form. So that sense of identity, sense of certain conceptions that exist there, that can be conveyed by the words. And then of course we have sound as a spiritual, it has a spiritual aspect. Like breathing of Vishnu is sound of the Vedas. And then we have Om, which is the essence of all the sounds. So Om is Vishnu. The goal which all the Vedas declare, which all austerities aim at, and which humans desire when they live a life of continence. I will tell you briefly, it's Om. The syllable Om is indeed Brahman. The syllable Om is the highest. Whoever knows the symbol, this symbol obtains all that he desires. So that's a sum total of all vibrations, sum total of all sounds, mantras, and it's no different than the Supreme Lord. So various Upanishads glorify the syllable Om, through which everything else. It's like later on we'll get the example of a prism. You know, like white light passing through the prism, you get all the spectrum. So in a similar way, you know, the Om vibration, through Om, through that sound, you get practically everything else in the universe. So this is the sound that was first imparted to the creator of the universe, which is Lord Brahma, in the form of a Gayatri. And through this, Lord Brahma was purified, and then through this, Brahma was able to create the whole universe practically. So again, it's sound, everything through the sound. So we have something, some idea in science also, that everything is pretty much created by the sound. Sound waves that rang out in the early universe sculptured its structure. The best measurement yet of their imprint on galaxies is a boon to dark energy studies. About 30,000 years after the Big Bang, matter collapsed around dense seeds of dark matter. Outward pressure from photons caused the collapsing matter to rebound, creating acoustic waves, means sounds. The ripples in a pond. Of course, it's hypothesis, but that's how they hypothesize. Anyway. So spiritual sound waves. So mantra, man means mantra, to deliver. So what is the origin of the sound? So it starts from the spiritual world, enters the material universes, and then the creation begins. So everything is sound vibration. Krishna sounds the flute, and that sounds descends to material universes, and then through that sound, the Om is manifest, and through Om, as we said, all the other different material forms. So the property of the sound, okay, we'll be a little faster here. Again, this is from Narada Purana. Om is the beat, nature of nada. Okay, there is unstruck and struck sound. That's a little bit as a nada. Okay, credit to Shabda Brahma, God as a sound. The different definitions of sound. I'll skip it a little bit. Anahata and Hatha. Like Anahata chakra corresponds to that. So unstruck sound and struck. Like somebody speaking, I'm speaking now, and then let's say somebody who has a proper receiver, you know, it goes through the ether, and then somebody who has a receiver, he can receive that sound. Otherwise, you can't catch that sound. Yeah. So manifested sound and unmanifested sound. Okay, so that's the example. Okay, I'll be a little faster here. So then we have the syllable Om, which represents the whole universe. And through different modulation, we talked about modulation, right? The way to express particular sound, and it conveys manifest and unmanifested states of material nature. It assumes different properties, and then the whole manifestation is created. Okay, so now we're going to come to definition of sound. I'll make a little pause here, just not to make the information overload. Any questions so far about what we have discussed? Yes.
So by chanting certain mantras, can we manifest something?
Yes, you can. Or you can enter into what is already described by those mantras, or what is already manifested. But you have to be qualified for that. So that's going to come. This is now what we're going to discuss. Anything else?
much time are we talking? Like
it's not a question of time, it's a question of purity. It can be instant if you expose yourself to the process which will purify it. Okay, a little more. I know it's a heavy, there are a lot of details, I'm skipping a lot. I don't want to make you, it's a very powerful science actually. The science of sound, understanding the properties, the qualities, the effects of the sound. So we're just giving some kind of brief essence. Okay, a little more, 5-10 more minutes, we're done. So, transformation of sound, these are different levels. Madhyam, Pashanti, we'll talk about that. There is Para and there is Madhyam. Yeah, Madhyam we said Vak. There was one incident, one lady had an interaction with this, how do they call him? No, it's not lion, this puma, but they call it, they have a name for it. 1 second, mountain lion, yeah. There's another name for it in US. Anyway, so it went into that lady's home and then she used telepathic kind of a vision upon that animal. And they say that animals can communicate with humans, or humans can communicate with animals better also through the you can send them pictures, you can send them different images. Yeah. And they'll correspond to that. It's very interesting. Maybe we can try to make some experiment. Maybe with some dog or something. You send them pictures, and then of course while you're sending them, they'll respond to it. So be careful what you're sending also. So they can read, they read like this in pictures. You can send them, you can imagine something and, send them that image. Impose it upon them. Yeah. So they'll respond to it. So that's telepathy. That's telepathy. So that lady, anyway, sent that mountain lion, Kagwar, they call it. It's Kagwar kind of, and anyway, the different names for it. So, or Puma, whatever, this type of Puma. So they send it away from the house, just kind of escorted it, said, please just go out, whatever, this and that, and the animal went. So it's very interesting. So that's on the level, that's on the certain level of sound quality. Yeah, certain level of sound quality. There are basic 4 levels. So then also this telepathic communication, we have some examples in the scriptures, like Vyasadeva, he said to his mother, whenever you need me, just think of me. And that was the case, and immediately he just manifested himself. And there was a need to anyway, Mahabharata, there's so many stories. When Vyasadeva was called to save the dynasty by procreating in the queens that were left without husbands and so forth. Anyway, so and then of course we know about Bhima. Bhima was also called upon, and his wife Hidimbi. Yeah. So that kind of telepathic communication, there are plenty of examples. So we have these Vaikari, Madhyam, Pashanti, and Para sounds. So it's all kind of one sound, but they are all of different quality. So they're all different vibrational levels. So Paravak is spiritual, it's purely spiritual. And then Pashanti, it just becomes more and more involved in the material elements. And depending on with which quality you pronounce certain sound, you get different effects. So we'll have a chart very soon. Okay, so here, so this is that external sound, it's just the gross sound mostly that you're hearing. And then Madhyam and Pashanti refer to internal or more subtle. And then Para, it's purely spiritual. So ear, mind, and soul, you see how they correspond to different levels of the being. So we are as a spirit soul, we want to communicate on that level, that's the Para sound. Pashanti and Madhyam, that's about mind. And Vaikari is the grossest sound. It's the grossest sound. Okay, so here we have these 4 levels. So what we speak now generally, and what it affects us on the material level, is just 1/4 of the spoken sound. It's only 1/4. You may think this is all that it is. No, it's just 1/4. You don't even access practically the other ones. Madhyam, it's thoughts, mental speech. And Pashanti, it's visualized, intuitive speech. That's more subtle. Transcendental, that's the Paravyak. Yeah, Paravak. Vak means speech, yeah. So these are these 4 sounds. So Vaikari is the grossest level. heard through external senses. Only you can perceive through external senses. Madhyam object is perceived something different than the sound. The sound is connected to the object mostly by convention. Pashyanti. The sound has different qualities. There already some certain kind of form. Difference between language that does not exist. Sound is intuitive and situated beyond rigidly defined concepts. So sound is one as the object. It has a form, has a oneness of it. And then paramik, highest, it's beyond the perception of the senses. Can be realized only by those who are completely qualified. There is absolutely no distinction. That's why we said sound Krishna and Krishna, they're one and the same. There's no difference. We can't perceive that now, we're not on that level of purity. There's no difference. So the sound contains within all the qualities of the object. Okay, a little more, just a little patience, we're almost done. So what are the manifestations of consciousness? You can see the manifestation of wakeful, dreaming state, deep sleep, and spiritual. These sounds can reach out or they manifest certain kind of consciousness like this. Then the type of body that you receive when you're exposed to certain sound or sound that responds to certain kind of forms. That means physical, subtle, causal, and transcendental. Then energy is different. Creative action, potency of manifestation, and knowledge invested in thoughts. Icha Shakti, energy of desire, transcendental potency. So that's why you may wonder, how can spiritual sound be pronounced or manifested materially? Matter or our mouth or ears are just the mediums. They're just the medium. It's just like electricity. Just like electricity. Copper is just the medium for electricity to flow. So that transcendental sound can float through our ears and tongue. Just like electricity flows through the copper. So that's why through that we can heal, through that we can become spiritualized, and through that we can manifest the same spiritual potency further on. We can receive it, we can pass it on. That's the Chit potency. That's the Parabhak, Chit Shakti. Chit Shakti exists. It can be conveyed through the sound, it can be conveyed through writing also. That Chit potency may pass or remain within any kind of material medium. Okay. And then there are different levels, manifestations of them that correspond to different vibrations like this, material or more spiritual, and then the different processes through which you can access or get benefits of those vibrations or sound. And then we also chant, like we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Now all of us have chanted this mantra. So now, what is the power and potency and result that you're going to get? Now look and see. When you chant on material level, that's offensive stage. Did we really think of Krishna? Did we think of Rama? Did we think of Radharani or something? No, it's an offensive stage. Offensive stage means we still commit many sinful activities. We don't remember anything spiritual pretty much. We pretty much think only about some material activities and this and that. So it's Maya Smarana. It's Maya Smarana. We just produce with some sound, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It's pretty much material. It's pretty much material. I mean, it is spiritual, but we don't have access to that. We don't have access to this. Bhava, Guna, and Lila Smarana. We don't have access to this. It is there, but we don't have access to it. So then when we become a little bit purified, that's a Nishta stage. That's the stage when we are free from lust, anger, greed, madness, and illusion. Very steady stage, spiritual stage. And then we can perceive no difference between sound and what it is. And sound and what it represents is the same. Or we can hear that sound. You can really hear Krishna, Hare, Rama. It's not different. And you're not thinking about anything else. You're focused on what you're speaking. So that's better stage. And then higher stage, visualize. That's Ruchina exactly. Then you see the form. Then you see non-difference, what it sound and what it represents. Like we showed you in the beginning, different notes, and you say that pattern of the different notes or whatever it is. So when we say Krishna or something, that's where at this stage you see Krishna. When you say Krishna. And then ultimately it's Lila Smarnam, you enter into the pastime, you're part of spiritual world. That's the potency. When you chant this Paravyak, when you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, purely, without lust, without greed, without envy, without anything to do with the material world, That's the quality of the sound. I mean, this is just to give you an idea. So any sound, at least these basic 4 levels are there of any sound vibration. And whatever you're going to be exposed, getting benefit or manifest, it depends how do you chant certain mantras. This is what we were going through this presentation, saying it's not all the same. How do you say something? It will have different effect according to different purity of the chanter who is chanting. So that's very important to understand. Okay. So then, what are the benefits of mantra? Well, they did a lot of different kinds of research. I'll just go pretty much fast through it. By different sound vibration. And this is something, why we are presenting this, because it's measurable. It's measurable. You expose, like I said, you listen to heavy metal music or something and stuff. For some time you may be, enthusing in some way, motivating this and that, but it has negative effects on the health and the psyche. It has a negative effect. Prolonged exposure to it, anyway, that I can testify pretty much. It'll have a negative effect. And then, but when we see all this different sattvic music, especially mantras, Gayatri, like this, increase the ability, all these different kinds of material benefits are there, and unwinding effect on DNA. That means the DNA becomes messed up completely due to whatever exposure, negative things, bad health, this and that. But when those vibrations are there, it unwinds it. It becomes normal, it becomes natural. And then repairs your telomeres. We know what the telomeres are. Your chromosome ending parts which affect your aging. So they repair the telomeres. So they did all different kinds of experiments on it. And then some of, like different sounds, mantras, yoga, vegetarianism, this and that, it helps. It helps to certain percentages, this and that. But then when find out what is very interesting, when somebody is exposed to the kirtan, we'll have a little kirtan maybe after this presentation, it increases or repairs your telomeres by 43%. Incredible effect, incredible power. That's measurable of this sound vibration. Effect. And then of course the subtle body, that's the gross body, the subtle body, prayer, and they have a very, very powerful effects on the subtle being, on the mind, psychologically, like this. So anyway, so science has shown that the human senses are imperfect and limited. Okay, so what we can point out is basically that sound is more powerful even than any other senses. I mean, the hearing is more powerful than any other sense. So that's why through sound vibration we can be affected in much more, much greater waves than through the let's say power of seeing, tasting, sensing. So sound is way more powerful. Here the example of the cardboard is given. Let's say light. It can shield you from the light, but it can't shield you from the sound. Sound is so powerful. So that's why when we wake up, usually how do we wake up? Mostly sound is more powerful rather than somebody putting on the light, right? So sound has much greater potency. Like they did also experiments, those who run, and they usually, what they use the gun, right? They tried it with the light. They were putting light, and then light kind of, it's turned on. And then what they noticed, it takes for the brain and the whole system to register that, it takes much longer time. It takes much longer time. But when they hear the sound, immediately you're up and you keep on running. That's amazing what the effect the sound has. So anyway, here's the definition of the sound. Major thing is that liberation by the sound. We can be bound by the sound, we can also be liberated by the sound. It's known as anavriti shabdat. So when we chant a particular vibration, transcendental vibration, we can become liberated from this material existence that we are bound now by. So spiritual effects, anyway, of course the goal is eternal love and bliss. Krishna means source of all things and source of all bliss. So we want to attain that is the source of all things and what is the most blissful. And we know that so many examples in the scriptures how Krishna playing his flute can turn something that is inanimate to become animate, and something that is inanimate to become animate. Yeah? So that's the power of sound vibration. Of course, there's plenty of examples like this. Nobody can resist its sound vibration. Something that of course, it's spiritual. It's the original sound vibration. So as the fire burns dry grass to ashes, so the holy name of the Lord, whether chanted knowingly or unknowingly, burns to ashes without fail all the reactions of one's sinful activities. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Okay, so to conclude, in essence, so mantra or sound vibration has the effect, very powerful effect on physical, mental and spiritual levels. I will see that mantra can repair your DNAs, can affect your chakras or mental or energetic points of your body, and definitely can affect the soul. Hare Krishna. Okay, any final questions or comments? Or maybe we'll stop now and later on during the dinner, yeah, we can have some further discussions. Yeah, maybe later. It's getting late. Yeah, just please. Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna.